The perfect car existed. It hauled family. It hauled lumber. It hauled everything you owned cross-country without breaking a sweat. It looked good doing it. Then we killed it. Not slowly. We suffocated it with leather seats, fake ruggedness, and the promise that sitting 3 inches higher somehow made us safer. We traded elegance for bulk, and most of us don't even realize what we lost. This is the story of the station wagon, and more importantly, it's the story of how we convinced ourselves we needed something better when we already had everything we needed. In 1976, Americans could walk into a showroom and choose from 62 different station wagons. 62 small ones, large ones, luxurious ones with leather and chrome, practical ones that cost less than a year's salary, sporty ones with V8 engines that could embarrass a Corvette at a stoplight. If you wanted to move people and things, the wagon was the answer. It wasn't a compromise, it was the solution. These weren't boring family cars pretending to be adventurous. They were honest machines, built on car platforms, low to the ground, actual trunk space you could use. A full-size wagon could seat 9 people comfortably and still swallow a refrigerator. You could fold the rear seats flat and sleep in the back on a camping trip. You could fit plywood, lumber, a canoe, 6 kids, and a dog all at once without thinking twice. And they drove like cars. Because they were cars. The suspension was tuned for road trips, not rock crawling. The engines were powerful because they needed to move weight, not because they needed to prove something. You sat at a normal height. You could see out of every window. Parking was easy. Fuel economy was bad by today's standards, sure, but it was no worse than anything else on the road. The wagon was the ultimate expression of American optimism. It said, we're going places. It said, we have things to do and people to see. It didn't apologize. It didn't try to be something it wasn't. By the mid-60s, the station wagon had become the defining vehicle of suburban life. If you had a family, you probably had a wagon. It wasn't a choice you overthought. It was just what made sense. The Country Squire, the Town and Country, the Vista Cruiser with its glass roof panels that turned road trips into experiences. These weren't just cars, they were cultural artifacts. Kids fought over who got to sit in the rear-facing third row, making faces at strangers through the back window. Families learned geography on cross-country drives, counting license plates, stopping at roadside attractions that don't exist anymore. The wagon was where life happened. Grocery, soccer practice, moving a college kid into a dorm, hauling a Christmas tree home with a tailgate down and a red flag tied to the bumper. In 1970, wagon sales hit almost 1 million units. 10% every car sold in America was a station wagon. Think about that. 1 in 10. It wasn't a niche, it was the mainstream. And then everything changed. October 1973, the oil embargo hit like a freight train. Gas prices didn't just go up, they quadrupled. Overnight, the rules changed. Suddenly, the big V8 in your driveway wasn't a symbol of prosperity, it was a liability. People waited in line for hours just to fill up, rationed to 10 gallons if they were lucky. Stations ran dry, tempers flared. America realized it wasn't invincible. Station wagons were hit particularly hard. These were heavy cars with thirsty engines, and when gas became scarce and expensive, they became anchors. Sales started sliding. Manufacturers panicked. Chrysler discontinued its full-size wagons entirely by 1978, just walked away. One of the big three looked at the future and said, no thanks. But the oil crisis alone didn't kill the wagon, it weakened it. What came next finished the job. In 1984, Chrysler introduced the Minivan, the Dodge Caravan, and Plymouth Voyager. And suddenly, everything the wagon did well, the minivan did better. More interior space on a shorter wheelbase, sliding doors that made loading kids in parking lots effortless, higher seating position for better visibility, built on a car platform so it drove smoothly, but it could carry more than any wagon. And it was different. That mattered more than people want to admit. If you grew up in the back of your parents' Country Squire, the last thing you wanted was to become your parents. The minivan felt new. It felt modern. It felt like progress. The wagon, by comparison, started to feel dated, stale, associated with the conformity of the 50s and 60s, with everything square about suburban life. Image matters, and the wagon's image was dying. But the minivan wasn't the knockout punch, it was just the setup. The real killer came dressed in hiking boots and marketed as freedom. The SUV revolution didn't start with the Tahoe or the Expedition. It started smaller. The Jeep Cherokee in 1984, the 4Runner, the Pathfinder. These weren't the truck-based SUVs your dad used for actual work. These were lifestyle vehicles. They had 4 doors. They had modern styling. They had car-like interiors. And most importantly, they were marketed as something more than transportation. You weren't buying a vehicle, you were buying an identity, outdoor adventure, capability, freedom to go anywhere, even though 99% of buyers never left pavement. It didn't matter. The image was enough. Then came the Explorer in 1990, and the floodgates opened. Here's where it gets interesting and frustrating, because the shift to SUVs wasn't just about consumer preference, it was about profit and regulation and incentives that made absolutely no sense. In the 70s, the government introduced CAFE standards, corporate average fuel economy. The idea was simple: make cars more efficient, save gas, reduce dependence on foreign oil. Sounds reasonable, right? But there was a loophole. Trucks and SUVs had different, more lenient standards. They were classified as light trucks, not passenger cars. So manufacturers could build a Suburban that got worse mileage than a Caprice wagon and face less regulatory pressure. The rules incentivized building the least efficient vehicles. And the profit margins on SUVs were insane. An Explorer cost maybe $1,000 more to build than a Taurus wagon, but it sold for $5,000 to $10,000 more. If you're running a car company and you can only build so many vehicles, which one are you going to prioritize? The math was simple. Build SUVs, make more money, face fewer regulations, win. Station wagons couldn't compete with that. They were caught in the middle, subject to stricter fuel economy rules, lower profit margins, and a cultural shift that made them feel obsolete. By the mid-90s, it was over. The Caprice wagon, the Roadmaster, gone in 1996. The Taurus wagon limped along until 2005. The Focus wagon disappeared in 2008. One by one, they vanished. Not because they stopped working, because we stopped wanting them, or at least we thought we stopped wanting them. Here's the thing about SUVs that nobody wants to say out loud. Most of them are worse at almost everything. They're harder to park, they're harder to see out of, they're more expensive to buy and more expensive to run. They're less efficient, they handle worse, they're more prone to rollovers, they take up more space on the road, in parking lots, in your garage. And the safety advantage? The one everyone talks about? It's mostly about being bigger than the other guy. It's an arms race where everyone loses. We all bought taller, heavier vehicles because everyone else did. And now crashes are more dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists, and anyone in a smaller car. We made the roads less safe by trying to make ourselves safer. But we convinced ourselves we needed them. We needed the command seating position. We needed the perceived capability. We needed to feel like we could handle anything, even though we were just driving to Costco. And the marketing worked. SUVs weren't sold as practical vehicles, they were sold as symbols of success, of strength, of rugged individualism. Even if your idea of rugged was driving on a dirt road to a campsite with full hookups. The station wagon couldn't compete with that narrative. It was too honest. It said, here's a car that does what you need without pretending to be something it's not. And honesty doesn't sell when everyone wants to feel like an adventurer. So what did we actually lose? We lost efficiency. A modern crossover might be more efficient than a 1970s wagon, sure, but a modern wagon would be even more efficient than a crossover. Lower, lighter, more aerodynamic, better for the environment and your wallet. We lost practicality. Yeah, your SUV has cargo space, but can you fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood flat in the back? Can you sleep in it comfortably? Can you load it without a step stool? We lost driving dynamics. Wagons felt connected to the road. They handled corners. They didn't lean and sway like a boat in rough seas. They were fun to drive when you wanted them to be and comfortable when you didn't. We lost visibility. Seriously, you sit higher in an SUV, but you can't see what's directly in front of you. Kids, curbs, other cars. The blind spots are massive. In a wagon, you could see everything. We lost elegance. every crossover looks the same now. Inflated sedans with plastic cladding. Where's the personality? Where's the style? Wagons had character. Sport wagons, luxury wagons, basic wagons. They were different. Now everything is beige, even when it's painted red. And we lost honesty. The wagon didn't lie about what it was. It was a family car, a work vehicle, a road trip machine. It didn't pretend to be a mountain climber or a status symbol. It just did the job. But here's the most frustrating part. We didn't have to lose all of this. Europeans kept building wagons. Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Volvo. They kept refining them, making them better, faster, more efficient. The Audi RS6 Avant is one of the most capable performance vehicles on the planet. 600 horsepower, 0 to 60 in under 3.5 seconds. And it can haul your entire life to a new apartment without breaking a sweat. Americans will pay 80 grand for a luxury SUV that drives like a refrigerator on stilts, but suggest they buy a wagon, even a gorgeous, fast, well-built one, and they'll look at you like you suggested they trade their iPhone for a flip phone.
Because it's not about logic. It never was. It's about image, about what we think a vehicle says about us. And somewhere along the way, we decided that sitting higher and driving something big and aggressive said more about who we are than driving something elegant and efficient. The irony is that crossovers are just lifted wagon. A Honda CR-V, a Toyota RAV4, they're wagons built on car platform, rear hatch, 5 to 7 seats. The only difference is they sit a few inches higher and have plastic cladding on the fenders. Subaru figured this out in 1994 with the Outback. Take a wagon, add a lift kit and some rugged styling, market it as something new. And it worked. The Outback is one of Subaru's best sellers, proof that Americans will absolutely buy wagons, as long as you don't call them wagons. So where does that leave us? SUVs reshaped everything. Roads are wider to accommodate them. Parking spaces are bigger. Drive-throughs are taller. Pedestrian deaths are up because trucks and SUVs have massive blind zone and hit people higher where injuries are more fatal. We rebuilt our infrastructure around vehicles most people don't actually need, and we're stuck in a loop. You buy an SUV because everyone else has one, and you don't want to be the small car in a crash, which means everyone has to buy bigger vehicles, which makes everything more dangerous, which justifies buying even bigger vehicles. The wagon can't come back. Not really. Not in America. The infrastructure is built for SUVs. The culture is built for SUVs. The regulations accidentally favor SUVs. And most importantly, our self-image is tied to SUV. We've convinced ourselves we need to sit up high, that we might need to ford a river on the way to soccer practice. But bigger is inherently safer and better. It would take gas hitting $10 a gallon and staying there to change that, or a massive cultural shift where efficiency becomes aspirational again. And even then, we'd probably just build smaller SUVs instead of admitting wagons make more sense. Because this was never really about the station wagon. It was about us, about what we value, about how easily we're persuaded that what we have isn't good enough, about how we'll pay more, use more, waste more, just to feel like we're winning some invisible competition. The perfect car existed. We had it, and we traded it for the illusion of adventure and the comfort of sitting 3 inches higher. Most of us don't realize what we lost. But every time you struggle to park your SUV, every time you can't see the car in front of you, every time you watch your fuel gauge drop on a short trip, you're living with that choice. The station wagon wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It knew what it was, and it did exactly what it promised. We could use more of that honesty now. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the rise and fall of the ultimate family car, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos exploring the fascinating stories behind the cars we love and the ones we lost. Thanks for watching, and drive safe.